You are listening to the Composing Trust podcast by Culture Solutions, a series on European cultural action with the world. Is Europe still attractive? How is it perceived outside the EU? How do Europeans promote culture together in the world and with which partners? What have they learned together? What is their experience? Our Composing Trust podcast series will address these issues. Welcome to you all. My name is Damien Helly, the co-author of this Composing Trust series by Culture Solutions. Today's episode is the first of our new series, Regenerating Trust, on youth and culture. It's presented by our colleague Elise Cuny, who draws experience from the 3 years she spent in Rwanda. In this episode, she interviews young artists and professionals from the cultural sector in this country.
You are listening to the first episode of Culture Solutions series on the theme of youth and culture, Regenerating Trust. With Culture Solutions' ambition to promote EU international cultural relations and question the ways Europeans and the EU engage culturally with the world, leaving youth behind seemed impossible. In this series, we present youth as cultural actors and artists actively influencing societies they live in by their mobility, ambitions, ideas, creativity and creations. Youth is more than the future, and it has the potential to regenerate if we give them the right platforms. This is what this podcast will do. Exiting a hierarchical vision of society, getting inspired by Félix Guattari and Gilles Deleuze to get closer to the idea of a rhizome, growing horizontally with every element being connected to one another, and as Edouard Glissant puts it, get away from a single root and let youth influence culture. In this series, we will hear about European cultural action abroad, importance of mobility for artists, role of artists in the community, but also listen to youth advocating for cultural heritage protection. We will discuss why it is important to support youth in the cultural sector, what forms this support can take, and how it is beneficial to European external relations. My name is Elise Cuny. I have lived and worked 3 years in Rwanda, and I was amazed by the creation and artistic profusion there. It echoes a need to understand the past and reinvent cultural references. In the first 2 episodes of this series, I will take examples from Rwanda and how youth can regenerate and contribute to the cultural sector on different scales. Art allows us to reinvent standards, invent new norms and new mode of expressions when we don't know, or we no longer know, or we're not able to say. Art regenerates. What I saw in Rwanda echoes the commitment of young people around the world to protect the planet and cultural heritage. This generation knows that if we don't act quickly to protect and preserve, it will be too late. The strength of youth is to create, not out of nothing, but for and through the past and the heritage. In this episode, we will hear Yohann Hillel Hamel. He's the director of the French Cultural Center of Kigali, l'Institut Français, one of the European cultural centers very active in Rwanda, spotting and promoting young Rwandan artists and creating artistic bridges between Rwanda and Europe. We will also hear Kaya Binchi, one of the artists who has been performing regularly at the French Cultural Center, as well as in the Goethe Institute, the German Cultural Center, and for the delegation of the European Union in Kigali. She recently came back from a 2-month artist residency in France, and she will tell us why cultural exchange is so important in the career of young artists. We will also have the insight from Jemima Kakizi. She's a Rwandan art curator whose goal is to support women and emerging artists by organizing exhibitions in Kigali and in the rest of the country. She wants to put art back at the center of the community. Her last exhibition features 10 women artists around the theme of art and mental health. She will tell us what she thinks is needed in terms of skills and cooperation for art and culture in Rwanda. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I asked Yohann Hillel Hamel, why do we associate youth and culture? Is it so obvious? The interview was conducted in French and is dubbed in this episode with the voice of our Culture Solutions colleague Estela Villanova Nunez.
Si on doit l'associer, c'est parce qu'on considère.
If we have to associate it, it is because we consider, perhaps in France or in Europe, that it is a way. We always use this term of individual emancipation, which is a little annoying, and of emancipation of the society.
C'est vrai que c'est un commun, la culture.
It is true that culture is a common element, a base between all citizens, also because we learn it at school.
C'est la chair, quoi.
It is the core, the flesh. By imaginating that grammar, learning to read, to count, to compose the skeleton, culture is all that there is around. It is the use of all that, and the constitution of the sense that we can make of life is most certainly done at school, and at a youngest age. That's why we associate culture and youth. However, culture and old age, or culture and middle age, also work very well. When we need culture, we need it all the time. I think that we could replace culture by sport, and it could be the same thing. We need sport all our life as much as intellectual activity. Besides, this link between culture and sport is quite relevant. Physical exercise is just as important as mental exercise. Perhaps this taste is developed particularly at a very young age.
Jemima Kakizi has done a lot to represent and promote emerging women artists. She tells us why it is so important to give space to youth.
I think that it's very important to give the space to youth because they get to learn from other youth, first of all. And also, as in Kinyarwanda, they say, urubyiruko ni u Rwanda rw'ejo, which means that the youth of now is the future of tomorrow. Believing in the youth or giving them a platform makes them more confident. It also helps them to understand that you are going to be tomorrow's leaders. So if you do things right, tomorrow will be great. And we are all, as human beings, we always want to do better. We always want to grow and learn. What they are doing is contributing to the growth of Rwanda, the community we live in, to get better.
I asked Johan what he thinks youth can bring to the cultural and art sector in Rwanda.
Rwanda, c'est un pays extrêmement jeune, donc.
Rwanda is an extremely young country, so the word youth can be used in many ways. The whole society is young. Today, young artists are exploring other fields than those in their recent history. I noticed that there is a will to reappropriate traditional Rwandan culture and to mix it with international cultures, mainstream music, dance, and try to combine tradition and modernity in the works they create.
Jemima also gave her insight on how young artists have the ability to transform and renew visual arts in Rwanda and why it is important to support them.
Art is not new in Rwanda because visual art, for example, has always been there. There is a style called imigongo, the motif décoratif that Rwandans used to use. They all have meanings, and it's an abstract art, which doesn't make visual art a new thing in Rwanda. But our way of using paint, our way of using drawing portrait is kind of new. You cannot expect people who don't understand what you do to support you. So that's why I think that as a curator or as an artist myself, this is something I've been also trying to work on, and I don't expect the result in a second or in a few months. It's going to take time, but I'm very positive that it's going to be possible in the future because as artists, we have a responsibility to take the arts to people so that they understand what we do, which I'm trying to do. I have an ongoing exhibition entitled Work With Me. Work With Me is more on supporting each other in the community, having empathy, and understand that everyone can have a mental health problem anytime. It's not something you choose. The exhibition is featuring 10 women artists. So the exhibition has two phases. The first phase was a fixed exhibition, and the second phase is moving in schools and youth center, and so that we can also have a conversation about mental health and how we feel, how can we take care of ourselves. I didn't want the exhibition to stay in Kigali only. I want this exhibition to go up country as well. Bring the arts to people. Understand that they can learn through arts, that art can make them feel good, what art can do in their lives. So life is a journey. We always learn along the way. The more exhibitions I curate, the more lessons I learn. For people who don't understand what we do as visual artists, we have to include them. And another thing I always talk about is, even now I'm speaking in English, but I love to have my concept in Kinyarwanda as well. So the exhibition in Kinyarwanda is entitled Genda Nananje, and I have the concept in Kinyarwanda and in English, because in the past years, most Rwandans felt like the art wasn't done for them, because if everything is in English and someone doesn't understand English, when they come, they will feel excluded. So I think it's very important for artists here in Rwanda as well to understand that we are doing art for everyone. But then you shouldn't expect everyone to understand English, which is very important and something I would recommend to all curators in whenever they are. If you are in Uganda, for example, if you are in Zimbabwe, make sure that the local language is also, it's interpreted or it's in both languages, so that, everyone that comes, they are part of the exhibition one way or another.
I also wanted to have Johan's perspective on Rwandan cultural sector in comparison with what he saw in France in terms of artistic creation, but also the structure and sustainability of the artwork. Those are factors that have an impact on artists at the beginning of their career.
Rwandan artists do not have a compartmentalized way of thinking. That is to say that there is not a musician who only does music or a dancer who only does dance. They are all transdisciplinary. They are moved from one discipline to another, from one sector to another, and this gives total free creations, which break the codes, which break the walls of the sectors. It is very refreshing. The other thing is that they are in short production circuits insofar as there is no much money or means. A creation follows an idea in a very fast way. There is no logic of production, as in France, where sometimes it can take 2 years to produce a theatre show. Here, there is the text, the actors, and let's go. It has good and bad sides because it means that there are little resources and that the artists finance themselves or find other means, but this transdisciplinary nature and this freedom of creation is something very significant in the country.
2023 is the European Year of Skills. I asked Jemima what skills she needed as a curator to perform her work better.
For now, the skills that I need more is on how to get the exhibitions funded, because you can have a very big project but no one is ready to sponsor it. Sometimes you have a big project and it's very important but you don't have the support, which discourage artists. I know a lot of people who are not doing art, not because they don't want to be in the arts, but because it's hard to pay bills doing art only, relying on selling paintings only. Even if someone doesn't buy a painting, there is a way they can support the artist by, for example, supporting their projects or even including them in the work they're doing, because learning through art is a very powerful tool. Anyone in any organization, that's something they can use, I had a chance to work with, different organizations such as UNICEF, Creative Action Institute, Girl Effect. I would encourage organizations and other people to include learning through art, through what they do, because it's the best way to learn. From my experience, people like it.
Let's hear now how a European Cultural Institute can support young artists. Johan describes us the strategy of the French Cultural Center in Kigali.
Alors, on soutient les jeunes artistes rwandais de plusieurs manières.
We support young Rwandan artists in several ways. First of all, we program them at the French Institute. We offer them a platform, a stage with quality technical equipment, the support of a technician, with communication. So we promote them in the country. There is a training dimension, meaning that as soon as we can, we put them in touch with French or European professionals, or professionals from the African continent, as it happens regularly. We design masterclasses that can last from 1 day to a week or 10 days in different sectors.
Et enfin, il y a une action de coopération.
Finally, there is a cooperation dimension, which is probably the most important because it is the one that supports young artists most effectively. We send young artists to Europe, to France in particular,
pour des résidences d'artistes,
for artists'
pour des
residences in cultural operators.
culturelles dans des institutions culturelles. Et peut-être
And perhaps also within this dynamic, we imagine partnerships with big festivals or big cultural establishments that honor the young Rwandan creation.
Jemima gave us her views on the ways to support artists that go beyond funding.
Supporting artists means even come to their events. When I started art like 7 years ago, we didn't have enough support. You would do exhibitions and few people show up. But now there are very many, it can be clouded, especially on the first day of the exhibition. Support doesn't always come in the form of money. Support also comes in encouraging someone or even commenting or having a conversation about what they're doing, because they can also learn from you, you can also learn from them. Something else that I would like to mention that I think is very important is to always remember women. As a person who's curating for women, I know that we don't have visibility. Even women have been raised from history of art, It's not that we didn't have, women artists worldwide or even in Rwanda or East Africa or in Africa. It's because at some point, some of the women's artwork were seen as a craft, not arts. But why? So I think it's time for art practitioners, for museums, everyone in the art industry. It's not about focusing on women. It's about remembering that women have been left behind for centuries in the arts and rewrite their history and make a change, If they are doing something, include them. If you think about an exhibition, if you think about an opportunity, remember that women artists are there, make sure that you include them one way or another. Because also women have many barriers that are stopping them from, flourishing, doing the arts 100% like men, for example. If you give birth, life is going to be different as a mother, as a provider. For very many reasons, you can have your periods today, for example, and you are having them for 3 days. You won't be as productive as you were. There is a lot of things that are making women not be more proactive. It's not something they can control. So I think that should be put into consideration so that, women artists get empowered and they are also given a voice and opportunities.
A European cultural center abroad not only supports the artists in country, but can also make the artists connect in Europe and worldwide.
Si je repère un artiste,
if I spot an artist, the idea it is not only to have him or her perform at the French Institute of Rwanda, but also to connect this artist to the Francophone Film Festival, the Chaillot National Theatre, the Cité Internationale des Arts, or the Théâtre de la Ville, so that the professionals who are in large institutions can be in dialogue with them and potentially program them, produce them, and then bring them to other places or the territories.
Ce qu'on a apporté, c'est ça, je pense que c'est d'abord et avant tout le réseau. Avec des institutions,
so what we can bring above all is a network with institutions that are up to the level of the artists. The institutions have resources, a strike force in terms of communication, and an extremely important public melting pot. The artworks that we see here in front of us in Kigali can have a capacity of up to 120 people. When I think of Kaya Binchi, who made the opening of the French-speaking film of Angoulême, she must have been 23 or 24 years old at this time last year. It was the first time she did a concert like that, the first time she went out of Rwanda, and she absolutely did not lose her means. Anne Hidalgo, François Hollande, or Rima Abdul Malak were there. She managed her concerts. Everyone congratulated her afterwards, saying that she was a wonderful artist. And today, there are lots of positive things ahead for her. She goes to France regularly. She's going to do the music for the next documentary of Marie-France Brière. She's going to be programmed at the Boule Noire, and she's going to do an African tour. We saw the artist, we saw her talent, we discussed with her and we created the connection. I consider that a French or European institute is a simple link, a bridge between this continent and the European continent. In reality, we're not more than that. We should not imagine that we are talent makers because the talents exist. They are there. We see them and we will say to institutions in Europe, look, be interested. And then it is up to those institutions in Europe to choose whether they want to work with the artists or not.
One of the ways a European cultural center can create bridges for artists from partner countries is through artist residency. Kaya Binchi, a young Rwandan singer who was nominated in 2021 for the RFI Discovery Prize, tells us about what she thinks of cultural exchange and mobility. The music you hear in this podcast is her song Mana i Rwanda, God of Rwanda.
It's an exchange. Culture is an exchange. The way an artist goes to Europe and comes with a different perspective or a different color on the painting they already had in their mind is the same way somebody from Europe comes to Rwanda, for example, or to any country in Africa. It's also a motivation for an artist to be able to actually put in practice what they have, to motivate their spirit of inspiration. Because, for example, if you help them sign into a label or into some production projects, because they will know they will have somewhere to put that, they will also be, inspired to create, to go back and be like, how did it inspire me? Or,
Why is mobility so important for young artists?
It's just always a good idea to move because, meeting people in France, it was a different culture, different way of speaking. That was, for me, the most beautiful, because also connecting with artists, musicians who have a different way of listening to music, or because music all goes all the way to the roots, the way you... And the way you're functioning, the things I learned, for example, in the music business, the way it's all aligned operational-wise, the whole skills, intellectual skills. I got to introduce Rwanda. I'm going as a Rwandese. It shows in the way I walk, the way I talk, the way my talent is expressed, the way I don't know. I just feel that spirit. And I feel like it's also an opportunity for them to learn about that, to be like, I think I heard somebody saying this one day I met this girl, Kaya Binchi. She was from, So it's just incredible exchange.
It is important to offer the opportunity for artists to travel to Europe, but also bring European artists and European expertise in the country of cooperation. The concept of residency can take place in Europe or in the partner country, and benefits are mutual.
Here we have Dorothée
Munyaneza in an art residence in the Chaillot Theatre for 2 months. She's creating a piece that she will present in Paris and in many other cities in France and Europe in 2024. Actually, in 2024, at the Chaillot National Theatre of Dance, there will be a Rwandan season of around a week or 10 days, and the idea is to present the diversity of Rwandan artistic creation. It's due the new generation, 30 years after the genocide, because in the 2024 it will be the 30th anniversary of the historical events related to the genocide. Dorothée Munyaneza is here in direct contact with young Rwandan artists, She will talk with them. She will also play this role of spotting. She will connect them, go on tour, with all that travel tour can bring in the life of an artist. Perhaps there is also a training dimension to working with an artist who is very well known in Europe, like Dorothée Mignanetta. In a young artist, whether he or she is French, European, Belgian, German or Rwandan, I think that it structures a career.
Education is a way to link youth and culture. Jemima touched upon learning through art, and I asked her to develop her opinion on that.
In few words, art and education is the same, but then those are things that are done differently. But art is big. Art is big. Art is interesting. We should do more of it because through art, you can educate anything. You can educate on any subject. You can talk about mental health using art. You can talk about teenage pregnancy. You can talk about empowering women. Art is another way of learning that is different maybe from what we are used to in schools, but a way that is very, very powerful. There is a project I have worked on in 2015 and 16 with the UNICEF where I was facilitating children to learn through art. It was very interesting because I got introduced to the climate change topic, and since that time, I also use recyclable materials to create art. So it was like I was hired to do something, but I learned from them. They also learned from me because I was able to facilitate children to express themselves through art. I saw that kids enjoyed it, but then at the same time, they didn't forget what they learned. Next year, some of the paintings we made, they were used for UNICEF calendars. For some of them, it was their first experience. It's something that is going to stay with them for the rest of their life, you know? So it creates memories as well, because this is something you are creating, for example, for the first time. So it means that you will never forget what you learned. So when you learn through art, it's a very interesting way of learning because you are learning and enjoying what you are doing at the same time.
And during her 2-month residency, Kaya also had the chance to present her music to kids in a class, and she tells us what she thought of that.
During the residency, I was doing the Action Culturelle. I was going to the schools, like with little kids, and that was the best, you know, they're enjoying, they're with you, they don't know you, like they probably just do geography in class, but then, you know, and then they just feel the music. Yeah, it was interesting.
After listening to these inspiring ideas and ways to support artists, I wanted to know what can be done more or better for cultural cooperation between Europe and Rwanda, and why it is mutually beneficial. The European Union is present in Rwanda with its delegation and embassies of its member states from Belgium, France, Germany, the Netherlands and Sweden. Beyond France, Germany has also its cultural center in Kigali, the Goethe Institute. European projects exist, such as the yearly film festival in the framework of European Autumn of Culture, displaying some of the best and latest European cinema productions. Through the African, Caribbean, Pacific European Union Culture Programme, the Rwandan agency in charge of cultural industry, Rwandan Development Board, obtained funds to support film and series production and promotion in the growing Rwandan film industry. However, when it comes to visual arts, theater and literature, or direct support to artists, so far, cultural initiatives have been very much led with individual or bilateral initiatives, leaving there space for more coordinated action and cooperation.
With
the Goethe Institute, we sometimes have joint programs, but we have also responded to a call for applications together, which is the Franco-German Cultural Fund, for which we have been awarded a prize with the objective of training, production and dissemination of young Rwandan artistic creation. with a view to the event that will be taking place in May 2024 at the Chaillot National Theatre of Dance. The idea is to produce works of young Rwandan artists who will be displayed in this great European institution and who may then be called to tour in France and Germany. We also have projects with Belgium, particularly on literature or cinema, with the Centre Wallonie-Bruxelles International. These are national approaches that, at some point, combine to support the sector. We could imagine more concerted actions with European partners on certain disciplines. It can happen on big operations like the international book meetings, but there are not really European approaches because the Canadians are present, the Algerians or the Moroccans can be present, or even Canal Plus. I remember that in my previous functions, there were European calls for applications, such as Creative Europe, which would include a country from the African continent in a European logic. European projects are time-consuming, long-term approaches because they are large calls for applications with a lot of money and a lot of means to support sectors and develop industries and ecosystems in countries. However, I think that today the European approach has the seeds for it to work, but there is probably a second stage to open now that there is a booming cultural sector that needs to be structured. We will probably need very effective calls for projects, like Creative Europe, to develop the creative and cultural industries in the country.
Among the structures who already support the development of artist careers and art industry in Rwanda, we can quote the Rwandan Art Initiative, funded in 2012 by Dorcy Rugamba, with the goal to contribute to the professionalization of art industry in Rwanda. There is also Issue Art Center, funded in 2007 by 8 Rwandan women, including its director Carole Karemera, with the mission to make culture accessible to all. And finally, L'Espace, a creative lab, private theater and production studio funded by Dida Nibagiroué and Wesley Rosibiza. When thinking cooperation programs with partner countries, knowing the pre-existing structures is important to build up on their efforts and strengthen those.
I think that there is a lot of collaboration that is needed. For example, in the Europe, the art industry is advanced than in Rwanda, so there is a lot we can learn from them. But also there is a lot they can learn from us as, for example, a society that is reserved, as a society that puts, heritage and the culture before. And which I think is very important because, for example, if you are bringing a concept from Europe to Rwanda, it should be taught in a way that we understand. We cannot be part of something we don't understand, And sometimes you see that there are projects that comes to Rwanda, for example, because I'm from Rwanda, I can't speak for Uganda. The concept is good, but the way it's implemented, it doesn't align with our culture, our lifestyle, our way of understanding, which I think is very important. So I think that for both sides, there is a lot we can learn from artists from Europe, and artists from Europe can learn a lot from us. So collaboration is very important for skills as well, sharing skills, and also trying to solve problems together.
This episode, focusing on cultural bridges between Europe and Rwanda, is an inspiration for artists and professionals from the cultural sector. We saw that there is space for more coordinated cooperation from European projects that can benefit creative and cultural industries in partner countries, because there is a lot to learn from how Europe has structured this sector, but also a lot to learn from ways artists create and think this sector abroad. In the next episode, we stay in Rwanda and we will meet professionals from the creative and cultural sectors who took part in youth program initiatives promoting young leaders in the sector. We will explore with them the potential of regional cooperation initiatives such as the African Union, European Union, Youth Cooperation Hub, and the Global Cultural Relations Program. That was the first episode of the series Regenerating Trust of Cultural Solutions on Youth and Culture.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of our Composing Trust podcast by Culture Solutions. If you liked it, you can subscribe and follow us on your favorite podcast platforms and contact us at culturesolutions.eu.